Welcome to Business Problem Solvers Podcast, where legal insight meets entrepreneurial innovation. Are you a startup founder navigating the complex legal landscape of entrepreneurship? Are you seeking practical advice, actionable strategies, and expert guidance to propel your business forward? Look no further. Eric Allspaugh is a seasoned attorney based in the vibrant startup hub of California, and he's thrilled to be your host on this exciting journey. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the intersection of law and business, bringing you insightful interviews with a diverse range of industry experts, thought leaders, and successful entrepreneurs. From intellectual property and contract law to corporate governance and regulatory compliance, we'll cover the essential legal topics that every startup needs to know. Our guests will share their wisdom, experience, and practical tips to help you navigate legal challenges, seize opportunities, and build a thriving business in today's dynamic marketplace. So whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur, a budding startup founder, or simply curious about the intersection of law and business, join Eric on Business Problem Solvers Podcast as we explore the legal insights and entrepreneurial inspiration that will fuel your journey to success.
Hey, Scott. Welcome to the Business Problem Solvers Podcast. And for my listeners, it's an honor for me to welcome Mr. Scott Johnson, a friend and colleague in the medical device community here in Orange County. I've had the pleasure of working with him directly on numerous projects, but significantly over the last 7 years at Device Alliance, where Scott has had the role of president. He's been head of committees and is now with the board and helping us direct our strategic alliances here in Orange County and elsewhere. Welcome, Scott.
Eric, pleasure to be on, my friend. How's it going?
We're doing great. It's really going to be a pleasure to have this time with you because we've had so much fun. And in fact, we had a blast this last week at the very large Octane medical device investment event here in Orange County. And so I wanted to pick your brain on all things medical device industry, where you see things heading, and ultimately, I want my listeners to get some tidbits and useful information from you to encourage them to get into the garage and inventing, and more specifically out of the garage and looking for investment here in Orange County.
Gosh, thanks. Well, that's it's quite a softball pitch to take a swing at, but I think for the sake of having a productive conversation, I'll stick to a little bit more of my area of so-called expertise. There are many people out there that have stats on the national scene, the state scene, but maybe just to kind of focus on Orange County a little bit, because I've just been very lucky and honored to have worked with kind of so many people and interact with them through the Device Alliance community that know quite a bit about the entire ecosystem here as a whole. So just high level snapshot, just kind of remembering a few of the stats that I had looked up and did some research on for an article I wrote for the Orange County Business Journal. Right now, I believe Orange County, the medical device specific economic output, I believe it's about 46 to 47 billion. Roughly about 145,000 jobs that are directly there, not including suppliers and service providers, but directly in those medical devices. And as far as the big players in the space, obviously diagnostics, obviously cardio, ophthalmology, but as far as the trends in Orange County go, that number, they expect it to be at least to 60 billion within the next 5 years. So last time I checked from some of the California Life Science Association's forecasts and some of the others for the state, the MedTech will probably be the second, if not the largest industry focused here in Orange County, which continues to just be so fascinating to me because as much as we have everything that we do right, there's still a couple just challenges which I've thought about and talked to people much smarter than myself on, that we still continue to want to solve as a community. I think we're getting there, because maybe the wool is being pulled off the eyes of a lot of people that have just been enamored with other things in the region for so long. But I think maybe your listeners would probably agree with this, but I just think post COVID, there's been a little bit more of a fresher conversation on the state of MedTech and where we're at. Now, whether we can kind of get that into a cohesive tactical plan to execute on, I guess remains the big question. So, the one thing you and I did discuss, and I thought might be a very interesting starting point with respect to your podcast and how you engage the community. About 2018, I started to do a little bit of a personal survey, and I'll take a step back and just share with you. I was working at Octane on the Launchpad Accelerator with then the director of investment relations, JC Ruffalo. I was working with my good friend Mark Bellotti and some of the MedTech, we'll call them panel that would review these MedTech companies coming through and looking for these Series A funding. And I started kind of hearing some themes on these entrepreneurs that have been around the nation versus the themes that I heard about the entrepreneurs that were here in Orange County. And I thought, well, I have my own MedTech podcast. I was talking to entrepreneurs. I'd meet them at Device Alliance. And I just started kind of picking their brains, saying, you have gotten to a certain state. And I would say, looking back at the 114 MedTech entrepreneurs I spoke with, most of them were at about a Series B, I want to say, right around there. And this ranges from many, many people. I'm sure the community knows Bill Colon, Dave Ferreira, Juliana Elstad, even speaking with Stan Rowe, Ramin over at CathWorks. I mean, we had actually put together a MedTech mastermind consortium of about 18 of these leaders in the community based on me conducting this survey. And I basically asked the MedTech entrepreneurs, what is it that Orange County specifically is missing, that if you could wave the magic wand and put this element into the ecosystem, it would have helped you out significantly? And overall, like high level, the number one answer, as far as majority of them, would say access to capital. Now, that's not necessarily, a strange revelation there, but I think more specifically access to capital inside of Orange County, meaning the investors are not here. And you can certainly talk to a lot of people, like 80, I believe the last stat that I had read, I think it's like close to 83 or 84% now of investment into MedTech comes from outside of Orange County. So the intellectual capital is here, the structures are here, but as far as the people that recognize it are willing to get off the bench and throw money into the game, the capital comes in, but then that ROI kind of leaves once, that company, does their big buyout. And then also to the second biggest one, once again, not a shocker here, just the cost of doing business. Okay. Countless conversations with commercial real estate guys, and we don't need to certainly go down this path. Obviously, we understand what it's like to do certain things in Orange County, and it's just not a cheap place to live. So just with those two stats there, that survey that we kind of wrapped up in 2012, we tried to do some serious work with a lot of different organizations to see if there was a model that Device Alliance or maybe a larger community can emulate, similar to like what they did, whether it's MedTech Alley or Boston. And what I mean by the model is a nonprofit working side by side with a chamber of commerce to kind of support these infrastructures for the fledgling startups, so that when they got to a certain round or when they got to a certain visibility, the resources were there to support it. Because from what I'm hearing and what I've seen here from like ecosystems like UCI or other places where MedTech companies come to, they start up, but then when they need those critical next step infrastructures, animal testing, prototype houses, et cetera, they're leaving Orange County to go get those services. And we would talk about the intrinsic benefit about having these resources here to kind of foster that environment. And it just continued to remain a challenge. And here we are 3 years later, certainly the access to capital. And then this has been a pretty decent year, coming off of like, some of the trends from the JP Morgan conference earlier this year. And even looking at some of the kind of homegrown heroes that have got access to capital. As a matter of fact, I just read a pretty comprehensive list from LSI, Scott Pentel's group, where they'd actually showcased all the companies that got access and got funding, and a good chunk of those were from Orange County, which is good to see. So I'm curious on your side of things with all of these challenges, and especially some of the stuff that you handle legally. Are you seeing similar trends as far as on your side of the aisle? And what I mean by that, are you seeing a little bit easier access to funding? Are you seeing the clients out there? Are they still having a little bit of a struggle out there? Or do you find that capital is flowing a little bit more and you're having more conversations with entrepreneurs that are kind of coming up?
Fair question. Perfect. I have seen ebbs and flows, and raising capital is always a challenge. It's always very difficult. People don't understand that. And I would say I actually saw an easy opportunity for investment into startups about 3 years ago. Post COVID, well, right in the middle of COVID, but the amount of money that was being printed, people with real money recognized that economically their money was going to just devalue. And so they were putting money into equities. And I'm no financial expert, but I saw people throwing money into smaller startups. And for a couple of years, I saw a lot of companies raise some money, which in prior years would have never happened. And so I enjoyed that time, and I worked with companies that were able to raise capital, and even a couple of them had some exits. So that was good. Right now, it seems like it's the same as the previous 15 years on average, in that there's deals that are happening, there's great technology, but you brought it up. Access to capital is always a challenge. And even here in Orange County, and I don't want to name names on who I'm disappointed with and who I thought could have brought resources or leveraged their resources better. I think that I think from my position, my best use of resources would be just to educate people about where to go and how to look, rather than try to make investment capital available organically right here in my backyard.
Yeah. It was interesting post-COVID. I will not say any names, but I had at least 5 to 6 meetings with various funds, various companies that moved into Orange County, into the vacant space, seeing that opportunity and wanting to transplant an office here. And, quite frankly, slap the Device Alliance logo on their office and say, hey, we know MedTech, as a way to compete now with a little bit more of a competitive market, where all of a sudden you have a MedTech entrepreneur that's able to actually have smart money, actually have a strategic partner that knows the CRO selections. They know the physicians. They know how to get to first in man. They know how to kind of grease those wheels and get things moving. So I was hopeful of that. And I am definitely now a little bit more in my role here. My current role here is the VP of Sales and Marketing with M4D. I'm definitely seeing that a little bit more, but it is still it is still interesting to me, because they just want the access to that. It's almighty dollar. But then even when the almighty dollar is there and you look for those infrastructure places to go, they do have to leave Orange County. Is that going to change? I'm really hoping it will in the next 10 to 15 years. I mean, you would think a $60 billion output would build an infrastructure like that here in Orange County, but who knows? Maybe, with the cost of real estate here, maybe it's just never a feasible option, and this is just one of those ladder rungs that we just never put here, but we still thrive as a MedTech community in Orange County. So interesting.
That's very insightful. I should mention some of the positive. One positive thing is that I really have seen an improvement in UCI over the last 10 years with their technology transfer office, the resources that they have, the openness to reaching out to industry, including groups like Octane. So that has been a very positive thing that I've seen. But I'm interested in hearing real quick about what you're doing with You mentioned M4D. Can you tell us real quick about what they do and what your role is, and I don't know how that impacts the community in a bigger way?
Yeah, sure. So M4D, as I mentioned before, I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing there. So they're a premier medical device manufacturer. They're specializing in designing, developing, prototyping, testing, validating, and full scale manufacturing of novel endovascular technologies. So my job is to drive the strategic sales and marketing plans, achieve corporate revenues, and kind of develop and execute the business development strategy, and also essentially, you know, grow the revenue to a significant amount, because one of the unsung, industries here inside of medtech is the neurovascular industry. And a very quick anecdotal story: about 2 years ago, Device Alliance did its first "What's New in Neuro" event. We had some great KOLs there. I had some really good partners going to work with, and to bring these speakers, this panel there. And you know, it's quite funny. All of a sudden, we're looking at 100, 125 people, but the quality of the people that were in attendance to hear these KOLs speak, Dr. Satoshi, who many people on neuro know, Wally Brzezinski, Joel Harris, you know, it was just shocking that we had so many of the industry leaders. I remember looking at Mark Dickinson, he's president of J&J Cerenovus, just sitting there in the front row, just listening. And he came up to me after the event. He said, "Hey, Scott, thanks. We don't do any neuro events in Orange County." And I was like, "Well, wait a second. Between, Balt, Microvention, Medtronic, all these headquarters, nobody talks about it." And that's just one microcosm of like a lot of the things that happen here in Orange County within MedTech. It's such a big impact, but it doesn't really kind of get talked about, maybe because of my own bias. And then fast forward, now working with a contract manufacturer that deals exclusively with this, it is just an exciting, and it's a new territory for me. But to look at how the globe and KOLs and SMEs work with the neuro industry here in Orange County, it is something else. And to actually be with a firm that continually, exceeds the expectations of the physicians and the doctors and the entrepreneurs that come into our office, there's a lot of exciting growth here. Even our company is going to be launching a manufacturing plant in Vietnam. Right now, I think I got some people over in Barcelona working with some KOLs there, and we're having global connections and just growing this company out. So I'm like really excited to the future. So it's kind of like a little success story inside of Orange County. But once again, we undervalue the impact that we have on the whole global market
Wow.
of medtech here in Orange County. So yeah, that's my exciting daytime job. In addition to working with you, obviously, on Device Alliance, I also sit as the corporate partnership committee member over at Chalk Hospital, with my good friend Kayla Kamano, who is there. She's recently moved on, but yeah, helping to make an impact over there with advancing some of the hospital care and bringing some awareness to some of the afflictions and help that they're giving children of Orange County.
Wow. Well, that's always great, and I know I've seen you working with the American Heart Association and chambers of commerce, and reaching out on behalf of Device Alliance and all sorts of groups trying to make connections. Real quick, what about without giving away anything proprietary, what kind of companies are you seeing come into M4D in terms of their finance? Are they venture backed? Are they round A, B, C? What is there a trend or a sweet spot that you guys have been seeing?
Yeah, it's high level. There's kind of a nice spread. So I'll kind of do the spectrum of: there is the initial R&D prototype development, and you are dealing with the physicians and doctors who have been on the front lines of, endovascular, neurovascular, just they've been in the trenches for years, and all of a sudden they've seen an unmet clinical need, and they've got an idea, and they've got a novel concept, they've got some IP, but at the end of the day, they don't know how to design it, and they don't know how to develop it, and they don't build for manufacturing. And I know it just seems very cliche to say, but it's something that I've learned, and I've got a great colleague who's just taught me so much about all this. They don't understand, just because you have this one concept, and yes, you can make a prototype, but can you actually scale this? And so to we do a lot of work on the R&D side, and that's really where my R&D team, they shine. Going up to your question as far as the clients we get, we also are getting mid-size and large scale companies that are looking to manufacture. And now with our ability to do manufacturing in Vietnam, that's obviously a very viable option, certainly because of the economies of scale there. So, and they need particular stents, catheters, the various technologies made. So those conversations I'll go, there as well. But I would say the sweet spot and the majority of it is kind of the R&D, because then we work with the clients so closely all the way to that development, because we have an in-house quality team that helps them get clearance from the FDA, and also, with MDR from the European markets. And so getting those clearances, like, just recently we did a FDA clearance with single pass with Bill Cologne. And so having that all in-house, then the client kind of works and engages with the team one-on-one. So they're a part of the process and the growth, and they see it there. So then they almost become like a strategic business partner with us to then take them that manufacturing process. But we've been there from day one with that. So I'd say that's probably the sweet spot as far as our client diversification.
Okay, great. What other questions did I have for you? Oh, my favorite topic for my listeners is to hear stories about startup entrepreneurs and some of the pitfalls that they have. And if you had any funny stories or that could give us insight on what people do at startups that they shouldn't do, and in particular, legal catastrophes. And one of the things that we have previously talked about was whether it's non-disclosure agreements or the chain of title in creating ownership or documenting inventorship and ownership and patents. Have you run across any of those, or do you have any other stories that are in the same vein?
Okay, yeah. Okay, I got one I absolutely want to pick your brain on, because I've heard this now on at least 7 different occasions within the past 2 years. And it is being engaged with lawyers. And when their client leaves, they will tell me that they should not have even filed a patent. And and I've asked 2 or 3 of these lawyers. I said, how long have you been in the game? They've been in the game for 15, 20 years. And when I asked them, I said, how often is it that you see that a client filed a patent that they didn't need to, unnecessarily did, or just had no business doing? And they said, all the time. I said, well, give me a number to wrap my head around. And I've had answers range from 30 to 60% of the time they should have never even filed the patent to begin with. So I guess maybe flipping it back to you. One, has that been your case? And 2, is the answer as simple as they failed to get a consultant to help them on that, to even, hey, should I be spending these tens of thousands of dollars to do this? Because they don't understand the whole game that they're engaged in. They don't understand the total available market, and they're not just thinking through what problem are they solving and how are they going to get there? Are they just in a state of like panic, like, oh my gosh, no one else has that, and they just act quickly, and next thing you know, they've blown hundreds of thousands of dollars, and like, well, I didn't need to do that. And the lawyer's like, yeah, it's a little bit of back and forth on that one. So what's your insights on that one? What have you seen out there?
So from my perspective, generally, no. Generally, I work with early stage inventors, and again, they have a great idea, and they saw that movie and they think Kevin Costner did it. If I build it, they will come. right? And that's the 95% of people, because they love their idea and they actually do have a wonderful idea. They do not consider all of the other things, because we hear the stories of the guy who came up with the pet rock or the chia pet or whatever. And you're like, oh, I could have done that, or I had that idea. They leave out so many other things. And what you alluded to was an understanding of the market. The medical device space is unique in that there's insurance reimbursement. It's highly regulated compared to other industries. And so I actually end up oftentimes with inventors that are in a hurry and they need to file their patents. You have to have patents in our industry for healthcare MedTech in order to check the box to even raise capital. There's no one out there that's saying we've got a trade secret. Even the folks with apps and software and things like that, they're generally tying their secret sauce to some sort of a hardware application and looking for patent claims, because it's difficult to obtain capital. And if you don't have a patent application, it's even more difficult. But the problem that you were bringing up is with, I would say, premier law firms that are working with constant streams of people that have access to capital, and are maybe the funnel is maybe not efficiently sending ideas their way, meaning they're like a venture capital fund gets solicited with 600 to 1,000 different ideas a year. And their perspective is that these inventions are good, but they haven't thought through the next 3 steps to make it through manufacturing, the scaling up of manufacturing, the regulatory, the insurance or the reimbursement, the distribution, the insurance, those types of issues. How to make an exit? Who are there? Any large partners available in their space, or are they going to grow it organically in house?
Yeah.
And so
those are like the first world entrepreneur problems, right? You got too much money to IP with. So yeah, that's a fair statement. Usually quite the opposite of the struggling first time entrepreneurs. But so let me then ask you a question on this one, because the trends now toward, I guess you could call it just the telemedicine aspect of it, right? So, I mean, whether it's generative AI, they're improving the efficiencies, and it's all about this, the biometrics technologies, the wearables. Even like the other day, I read an article, with BCI, and that's going to be like, my gosh, I saw some like astronomical numbers on that whole market. So everything's kind of opening up to this personalized medicine aspect of it. So when you add in, and I can use maybe neurovascular, but just think about any of your patents. Now that we're kind of getting more into this VR reality based tech transfer stuff on IP, what are you seeing out there? Like, what's your message to the medtech community as far as how they should be thinking about that? Because I think people are addressing that as an afterthought. We'll just add this technology in, because then every time you say data, investors get extra excited. Right. So it's almost people are just plugging it in there at the very end to get to make it a buzzword. But is there an IP strategy a mistake that you are seeing startup entrepreneurs make in their thought process from the get-go? Or do you feel that that's just something that kind of evolves with the IP as it goes along? Or do they need to take much more considerations up front about how that device will evolve over 10 years with respect to this data transfer?
Yeah. So the inventors and entrepreneurs that I'm dealing with regularly, They have the ideas. They are generally engineers with technical expertise, typically have a regular day job, and they have these ideas of, I'd like to one day, uh, develop this on my own. And so I see a lot of issues in documentation, and when inventors leave one company and go to another company, it's critical to document employment agreements, independent contractor agreements, non-disclosures, to understand those and to be careful when working on your side hustle, to document things outside of work hours, to not use a work phone or anything associated with your 9 to 5 if you have any inkling to develop a product separately. And that was related to this is the big lawsuit that Massimo and Apple have had. We talk about the patent litigation, and it's been patent litigation at the ITC and very interesting patent litigation, but it really stemmed from personnel and HR, with people leaving a particular company and a large group being acquired in a systematic way that raised the red flags and drew the attention that some unfair business activities might be happening. And so in that particular case, it stemmed from a personnel issue and not, maybe it was IP related. I haven't delved into the exact nuances of and details of the case, but definitely having non-disclosure agreements, having processes in place to document that, hey, I'm leaving. It's a clean separation. I'm coming on board. Hey, I'm not bringing anything in that I should not have, and we're good to go. So just diligence, and it's difficult. I mean, I think people have a gut sense of what's fair and what's not, but they don't know how to ask, embarrassed to ask. And, if they do ask, does that send the wrong signal rather than, hey, I'm glad you asked that question. I want to be transparent and handle that issue now, and we can make it work because you have disclosed it. So there are solutions, and people shouldn't be afraid. And that's an issue that I see with a lot of garage inventors.
Yeah, I remember the interesting thing with that Massimo one that I didn't quite consider at the time was, my gosh, I think it was like an email that went back who knows how many years, but then the employee leaving, which is already a kind of California HR nightmare, right? But then buried in that, like, what exactly is claimed the scientists can and can't do, right? So yeah, to that
Yeah.
point, it definitely gets messy. But the one thing, when you and I were talking a little bit at Octane, is looking at where the big trends are, as far as, we kind of did a snapshot of what Orange County is like, and looking at kind of the bigger trends in medtech, the generative AI, the telemedicine, the personalized medicine. We've spoken for years at events kind of on this consumerization, and the worlds tend to stay separate. But now, with a little bit of this virtual reality healthcare and kind of AI getting into it, I am curious, have you seen anything that has kind of surprised you on the AI side of things with respect to technology and medtech that maybe people have not seen or considered? And I'll give you an example. One of the companies that I had, when I sided with, could basically detect cancer cells using AI. Gosh, I want to say 8 years ahead of the current technology based on these predetermined algorithms. And even though that they had these studies and these are pretty concrete white papers, they still were, probably years away from making any submit claims, you could do, it's called pre-screening, I guess, would be like the safe word for it, but still the legalese around
Yeah.
that technology being used, they say is still, it's almost in development now, where there's just a lot of eyes on the big companies to make moves first versus the small guy to even get into that. Have you seen anything that's been interesting to share with the medtech community as far as how that's been playing out with respect to what your claim should be and how much people should be precautious or brave, I guess, with
Yeah.
respect to how AI is integrating into medtech?
Wow, you flipped the script. This is a super interesting and evolving space. And what I could tell you is I worked on patents going back about 10 years where uh, MDs and data scientists were getting and collecting large data sets of 20,000 patients over long periods of time, epidemiology studies with lots of data, very detailed, and using it wasn't uh, artificial general intelligence, it was just algorithms and smart algorithms that could detect mathematically things that you and I just were not capable. We can track 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions, but once we're asked to reason in 5 or 6 dimensions, we lose it. We just can't do that. Well, mathematics can. And so going back 10 years, I worked with a company that was able to use big data sets and come up with an uh, 12 lead EKG monitoring system that could detect all sorts of cardiovascular issues in 90 seconds of resting rather than requiring a patient to get up on a treadmill and do a stress test. And it had particular applications for diabetics or people who had lost limbs or who were severely obese and couldn't get up and get moving. How could we do these tests? So I've seen the data, I've seen those things working their way through FDA. And adjacent, I've seen similar big data used for detecting blood infections well in advance of any traditional systems. Like we're talking 48 hours, 72 hours in advance, being able to detect somebody who might be susceptible to a sepsis. And so FDA doesn't have a pathway yet clearly defined for people to feel comfortable with disclosing big data or sharing their algorithms and things like that. So we're in a gray zone right now where these devices are being limited in their clinical applications. They're being used as in-house diagnostic. There's a different MDDR was the FDA guidance term, in-house diagnostics rather than diagnostics that could be sold outside or with FDA regulation. What's my point? I hope that I know that FDA is looking at this because of generative AI exploding, and there are massive applications. I think that very technical people recognize it as just sophisticated math. And there's going to be some interplay with the marketing folks and the technical folks and the regulatory folks to take advantage of this generative AI or these algorithms because they're super powerful, and there are now smart algorithms that could probably help people or engineers identify trends and help them get their data sets solidified in such a manner that it's reproducible for FDA purposes. That's the big hurdle. Is FDA is going to be like, you've got some proprietary algorithm. If you ask the same question, a different way, we get a different answer. So
Interesting.
I see some issues there. What about you? Have you seen any trends?
No, you know what? I mean, it's been conversational at a very high level for me in some of the events I've gone to. Personally, in my day to day, I am not seeing that. If anything, I read in the news, Eric, it's probably, lately it seems to be a lot of movement on the robotics front, which is kind
Okay.
of another interesting one. But I guess that's a whole nother conversation in and of itself. But yeah, I think I wanted to make sure that I was kind of staying within a lane that I felt a little bit more comfortable with this conversation, kind of keeping it here to Orange County, because I think, you know, day to day and being involved in device science and supporting the other organizations here, when the problems that I'm focused on, although AI is, awesome. And, we've certainly all heard, David Chang, give presentations here in the local community. It's, I think kind of about Orange County, about what's the next 5 to 6 years going to look like, and how can we break down the divisions, I think, that happen within this county between, I mean, my gosh, even if it's between various MedTech organizations, or how we can kind of get out of our own way. Because to me, when you look at other models around the US, and you think to yourself, like, we should be able to do that. And it's, everyone gets excited. They all talk about the ideas, but then at the very end of the day, this just is like, any other business. You say, well, what's the tactics? What are we going to do? And then there's just a kind of like, yeah, you're not trying to move rocks there, Scott. You're trying to move earth. And I'm not in the earth moving business. And so you kind of say, well, okay. So everyone recognizes the market. They recognize it's a serviceable market. They recognize the money's coming in. They recognize all this is going to be growing, but there's that first mover, and who's it going to be? And I feel like there's just been it's been kind of stuck in that gear for a while.
Mhm.
I do sense a change, and I do sense organizations are getting a little bit, and maybe not frustrated is the word, but they're getting a little more of a sense of urgency. Like, okay, we can kind of act on this, because the world is getting smaller and smaller. And I think Orange County's impact on the global medtech industry is just getting bigger and bigger. So, but at the end of the day, businesses need to do what businesses need to do. This is the game we've signed up for. And, we need to make a few risky choices, but in order to create sustainability and actually like make Orange County a beacon of med tech, that's kind of where my head is at between the various organizations, that I've been trying to do. But, some people might say maybe a fool's errand, but I think we'll all be laughing looking back at this ecosystem in 5 years, saying, "Wow, we don't really recognize this place," because
Okay.
there's going to be so much growth here, and if we can be a small part of that growth and that catalyst for change, then hey, so be it. So
Awesome.
that's kind of where my goal is at the end of the day, right?
I love it. So, what kind of resources would you share with viewers or listeners today who are coming on board? You see all sorts of networking events and all sorts of resources. Who would you give a shout out to, or some resources that you could give to these hopeful entrepreneurs?
Oh gosh, yeah. So obviously, without everyone knows my involvement, I think, with Device Alliance, but having been involved with, and I'm just kind of going through the top here, an organization that just partnered with us for the first time in a long time, Mix Medical Innovation Exchange. I went to one of their events, very engaging. They have a very unique dynamic and a different type of engaging conversation for startup medtech leaders. Obviously, Octane having wrapped up their medical innovation forum. We had just signed a strategic partnership with SoCal Bio, and we actually are looking to support them more on future collaborations. Obviously, the Orange County Regulatory Affairs Committee, OCRA.
Mm-hmm.
But these are different groups. I think what I would love to see a little bit more of, and what I'm kind of getting tapped on the shoulder on, is a little bit more of a cohesive relationship in an event to get a little bit more of the local investment community. And I believe that the local chambers, whether it's the Irvine chambers or other city organizations, to kind of get involved with what the medtech community is doing. Um, I just see them being able to kind of create a little bit more value add for some of the challenges we have. Because truth be told, Eric, you were part of this 5 years ago. We did a MedTech. I believe the word was like the mega mixer, right? We had 6 organizations. We had UCI, Beal Applied Innovation. We had all the organizations that I named off, and we got like 500 or 600 people together for those events. Amazing feedback, tons of energy, tons of like, hey, what's going on next? But at the end of the day, I had a nonprofit vehicle, and people were volunteering their time, and what it needed was a full-time paid staff, and to kind of build this thing up, right? So shame on me, for kind of plotting such an aggressive course. But the thing is, the energy is there. And I look at organizations like LSI, like what Scott Pantel's done, and the KOLs and SMEs that he brings here. And it's like, that's the way that I kind of see the do it. And there's plenty to go around here and support this. And there's plenty for Orange County. So if there's entrepreneurs out there looking to like get involved into groups, or they need specific resources, please, by all means, if anybody wants to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, I get quite a few requests all the time. And so shame on me. I would have made a great recruiter in another life, but I'm happy to point out resources or people that they're looking to connect to here in the ecosystem, because quite frankly, it's just what Device Science does best. We connect people to resources that are needed, and that's obviously a very simple way to go. And what's nice is, if somebody doesn't know someone, then the next person will know someone who knows someone, right? Who can basically find that. And that's one of the things that I always liked about Device Alliance, is it was a very tight-knit community, and we moved things out of the way for people to get connected. And we didn't do it at a high cost. We had very easy barriers to entry. And I think especially for those entrepreneurs that are looking for the resources and some exceptional teammates to help build their team and the access to capital, we had a good network of connections there. And so we're going to continue to grow that. And you and I obviously both working on the next generation of the leadership team. And, me with my own MedTech podcast, we're constantly looking to just amplify those voices that are looking to help. And so I guess at the end of the day, for any of those entrepreneurs that are listening to the show, all I would simply say is reach out and ask. I'm happy to do what I can do, and happy to point you out to at least someone who can help you if I'm able to do so myself.
That's awesome. Hey, what's the best way if somebody wants to get in touch with you? Is it LinkedIn or M4? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, please do LinkedIn. I try to keep all my worlds separate. So my nonprofit side, a lot of people just reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. That's Scott Johnson, MBA, and you can put in Device Alliance in the search, and hopefully my name will get brought up. But always happy to connect, and always happy to a lot of people will reach out to me just to kind of get some industry insights and to see what I might know within the Orange County ecosystem, and happy to be of service any way I can.
Awesome, Scott. You're the best. And I'm going to hit you up for a follow-up in 6 months to see how our predictions are unfolding.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you what, on that note, a quick story. Last year, we did a partnered event with, we were at Avamed, and we did a panel, and I'm starting to, we're engaging with some of the people who have been over there. Juliana Elstad's been a fantastic, partner and a collaborator as far as that. And what is interesting is there is not national, there's global interest in what Orange County is doing. And I have the conversation so much, and I've had the full spectrum of it. And it's interesting because you kind of tend to get the people they've just been there and they've done that. And they're not skeptical. They're just telling me, hey, Scott, I've been at this quite a long time. I don't see the tide changing. This kind of just is what it is. But I'm seeing a little bit more of a shift in the conversation. And that's been very, very hopeful. And I think it just kind of it's like the one snowflake that creates that avalanche, right? And so a lot of these groups that are kind of coming and talking to Device Science and saying like, hey, what more can we do? What can we actually do to like get this going? Because I think everyone else feels that same feeling of antsiness, like, hey, we've been doing this for a long time. We're so much stronger together. We can do things in our own backyard. Why are people coming into our backyard and doing it better than us when we're the ones that know how to do it best and we're right here? Right. Mm-hmm. So that conversation we are always open to. And obviously, about the couple of additional strategics who we can't name any names right now, who are looking to kind of expand our footprint in, because at the end of the day, Eric, people like yourself, the team we had, whether it's Tyler, Kevin, Lisa, like our executive team, the brand Device Alliance has, I am always impressed that we work pretty hard to keep that a really, really good brand. And it has a good reference here in Orange County. And what can we do with that to kind of up our game and take this to the next level? So I'm always open to those conversations as well. So if anyone has any ideas, by all means, please feel free to reach out to me as well. We are always looking to collaborate.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Scott, for visiting the Business Problem Solvers podcast. And I'm looking forward to our next event.
Fantastic. Eric, hey, you've been a great friend. You've been a great partner. Thank you for all of your service. Thank you for all your volunteer work, and excited to see where the ship takes us next. So let's keep it going.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes, where we'll cover topics ranging from business formation and fundraising to contracts and compliance. Subscribe now and never miss an episode of Business Problem Solvers. Business Problem Solvers podcast is proudly brought to you by Eric B. Allspaugh, APC, providing comprehensive legal solutions for startups and entrepreneurs. Visit our website at www.alspaughlaw.com to learn more. Disclaimer: the information provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice. Consult with a qualified attorney or legal advisor to address your specific legal needs.